ask for model villages or smart villages, so that we can improve something. I mean, that would require lesser funds as compared to building these smart cities. So, that is my, submission as a layman, because again, if we, I mean, it's just like, having a bullet train and then we don't improve on our existing trains, it is very difficult. I was traveling in train and I couldn't find water and even clean toilet, and then we talk in terms of bullet train. I think this needs a very, very, careful, thinking before, going into that. So that's my question to Mr. Abhinav. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is also to Dr. Abhinav. So thank you for the very informative insights from best practices across the world. So my question is, you mentioned about the role of private sector, for example, and you talked about how the compensation structure could be actually taken up, and also about the PPP model and how it is more accountable. So sir, my question is exactly this, that the challenges about the role of private sector are exactly the opposite, in the sense that given that it runs on the logic of cost minimization and profit maximization, the compensation and even the idea of accountability and transparency, which the state and the public sector could provide, actually is at question. So sir, like, how do you see that this could be actually addressed? Thank you.
Yes, please. A couple of more questions, then we'll have to give time to the panelist also. Yes, I see one hand there. Okay.
So I have a small comment for Professor Bhomek's presentation, because in the light of smart city, you have already marginalized these slum dwellers and the poor, so which are already marginalized in Amritsar. And I found that they are considered as a cancerous growth. They are considered as unwanted. But in reality, they are part and parcel of the city, and they are indispensable for the city. And you cannot run a city without them. I give just small example from being a sociologist from one household. If your domestic servant doesn't come, then you can see that what happens in your house. And I usually call that these people are angels of peace in the household, and angel of peace in the city also. So the problem is that they are not perceived from the right perspective, because all the planners, they are from higher middle class, they are foreign educated, they don't understand what are their problem, that how they are fighting with their problem. Instead of understanding their problem, we are marginalizing them. So there is need to understand them from their perspective. Thank you.
Can you pass on this microphone? Any other hand? One here. That's it.
Hello.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
One here. Okay.
Sir, in
Two.
all the presentations, we have been talking about the problems, which basically are related with the infrastructural problems, and we are suggesting the ways that this should be done, and we are talking about the inclusive growth also. But I will like to know that is there any relationship between the increasing urbanization wherever it has been done and the increasing crimes against in general and the crimes against women in particular?
Thank you.
Secondly, that we are using this term that urbanization should be there. But when we implemented the new economic policies long back, then we were talking about global village. Is there any contradiction between these two? Thank you.
I think in several of the papers, we are suggesting the solution to the problems of inclusive cities in the form of urban planning. Now, we have experience of some of the cities which are planned properly. Chandigarh is one of them. Now, can we say with certainty that planning has solved the problem of urbanization? Look at the congestion, the solid waste management, and the way the people who come and they are farming the slums, and then they have to be pushed out of the city at far off places where they were not willing to go. So planning, if it has to be there, we have to learn from our past experience. And we, secondly, as Professor Jeevan Kumar and Bhaumik has talked about, that voice of the poor people who constitute a large majority of population need to be heard. It's a billion-dollar question how their voice can be heard. They are not only poor and marginalized, many of them don't have even their identity. They are not organized in any way. And the whole administrative structure, including police, is arranged against them. And there is no social class which is trying to organize them. Previously, some section of middle class was having sympathy with them, but today the rising middle class is siding with those who want to expel them from the urban areas. So I would like to invite from the participants, is there some way, a new way, to find the voice of the urban poor to be included? Without that, I believe that it's very, very difficult to include them in urban development. Thank you.
This is a medley of papers from slum cities to street vendors of Mumbai and so and so. This brings to the attention that what has happened to the urban scenario in India in the post-independence period. Now, we had a lot of plans, lot of projects, lot of master plans and other things, but the problem was nothing was comprehensive and nothing was in perspective. Just in the morning we are talking about that here, the campus we are sitting, there used to be a beautiful hill which vanished. So the main problem, I think, that when we bring in a new plan or new project or new mission, whatever it is now, nowadays the mission term is very well, we forget what happened to the previous one, what was the fault with them, how we could not achieve it. And another problem is, which everybody touches but not in that there lies faulty planning and the rural-urban divide. We just forget that rural is transforming to urban, and if we destroy the natural resources like hills, like natural drainage system and others, no amount of urban planning will be helpful to negate all those things, and we will have Chennai's and Mumbai's every year.
Thank you. Well, I would only request the panelists to speak when the specific questions were addressed to them. And you must realize that we are already behind schedule by 45 minutes. So make the responses very brief. Alakshidra, you have the first opportunity.
First, answering your question, why didn't we mention migration? I can definitely speak for myself, but I think we are working on a premise that rural to urban migration is one of the major factor of rapid urbanization we are having. So that may be the reason other people also didn't mention it, but definitely that was the reason I didn't mention it. Second, why population and one-child policy was not mentioned. I personally believe one-child policy was not something which we should be implementing here in our country. One.
I'm sorry. This discussion cannot take place right now. Okay. This you have to.
Yeah.
There are larger issues which are affecting not only urbanization for everything. You don't have to respond to everything. Okay.
So, Dr. Agarwal, there were many things I wanted to speak, but of course in 10 minutes, and then I stole 2 or 3 minutes extra. In 13 minutes, I really couldn't do that. So I wanted to talk about white flight, which was basically suburbanization, which happened in the United States. But now things are changing. Actually, whites are coming back, or affluent class is coming back in the inner cities, and black people are priced out from the market. So smart city is going to create that kind of problem everyone is aware of. It's just that we are trying, that New York City deal with Blackstone is a kind of understanding that, this shouldn't happen. We need to have a more inclusive city. So that is the reason. But yes, urban sprawl was the very beginning of this, definitely. Okay, role of private sector. Very, very good question. And actually, in my class, I always get this question every year. At least one student would definitely ask me this question. There is an inherent conflict with private sector. Of course, as you mentioned, they need to have more, cost minimization, profit maximization, how this is going to work. That's the challenge. And that's how, like, for example, there is something called tax increment financing, TIF, which has worked well in United States, in Canada, and now Europe is also trying to emulate it. So it's not that challenges are not there, but definitely we need to work it out. And that conflict is always going to be there. So TIF is one of the things. Similarly, other tax measures, such as, like, giving 10-year tax holidays plus something else, is definitely going, is helping, like, states like Oklahoma, which is inherently, it has nothing. But now more and more companies are coming in there because of this incentive policy.
You have to close, huh?
Okay, so,
We can
okay,
take the.
thank you.
I think this slum policy and all, it's true. It's, in fact, what they've said is absolutely correct, both addressing it. But there's, like, we were able to get, I was very much involved in that, in the national policy for street vendors, which later became an act. There was also, before that, there was a national policy for slum dwellers, which remained a draft and is just kept aside. I think there's a lot of money involved in this. It's not just funding and private and public, but the rent seeking which is there, which will not allow these things to be legal. I mean, I can tell you in the case of hawkers, old data, 1998, when Tata Institute of Social Sciences conducted, on the behest of Mumbai Municipal Corporation, conducted a census of street vendors in Mumbai. At that time, it was found that 385 crores was collected as rent from them by the police and all, which must be 1,000 crores now. Similarly, in 2000, there was Jan Sanwai in Delhi, 50 crores a month is collected from street vendors and cycle rickshaw people. So obviously they are not going to be legalized because you're going to lose a lot of money. And that time I think Vittal was the chief vigilance commissioner, and he had put it up on the website also. He said that Delhi administration should take note of these things. But I think these are factors also. One is the policy part, of course, but the other thing is that privatization also leads to these other things. This type of corruption which comes up, I don't know whether it's specific in our country or not, because I don't believe it is, because it would be everywhere. And that would prevent such things from happening. As far as the cities are concerned, all planned cities, I'm a bit wary about smart cities for that, have become like this. Whether Sucha Singh talked about Chandigarh, look at Bhubaneswar, which is another planned city, look at Rourkela. I mean, there have been studies by sociologists on this, that because you don't make provisions for the poor, you don't have places, then, and also the services, as he rightly pointed out, the services of slum dwellers are very necessary. So where do they go? You can't expect rickshawalas to come there and go back to the village 50 miles away at night, like good schoolboys, But they have to stay there. The maid servants have to stay there. All other service providers have to stay there, but no provision is made for them. So I think that's what the problem is there in all our cities, which have come up, the so-called smart, the new ones. Thank you.
Mr. Chaube, there has been no specific question to your normative framework for distribution to be brought in. But still, since you have a long note that you have taken during the discussion, I will give you 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. Only 3 small points. But whatever issues have been raised, they are all built in that index. But they are not outside the index, because whenever we are talking of, say, taking care of distribution, that part takes care of. Professor Sucha Singh, he brought in that now middle class is not sympathetic to the poor. I think that this is what Piketty is also talking of. Isn't it? Over time, what is happening, petty bourgeois phenomena, which Marx was suggesting that they somehow feel and they side with the bourgeoisie. This planned part, when often you read, particularly in the reference to that disaster management, that the unplanned growth has taken place. I often felt that it is ill-planned development. It is not, as elaboration has been made by Sharadji, that you have planned the city, you have roads, but you have not kept the social factors in mind. For R.K. Puram, they say the no place was made for laundrymen. So if that kind of plan is made, where you have only physical planning, no social understanding, you can't succeed. As far as this Harrod-Tedaro model is concerned, even that did not take care of the suggestion that what kind of, they will be immediately absorbed, where the absorption was not taking place. So people often in development used to talk push and pull factors. But actually what is happening, they are being pushed from the rural area and they are not being absorbed, they are again pushed back by the urban area. So that is how the slums get created. I mean, that is the explanation that comes to my mind. On a small issue, that population, actually thanks for that we failed, that we are today talking of demographic dividend. If we had succeeded, perhaps we could not have talked of it. But the second part, that China aged much faster than Europe did, simply because you introduced that policy. And not only that, the aging has taken place very fast, the CSR, child sex ratio, is pretty bad. And that is the reason now they are reversing, isn't it? That is, I mean, one important part. They have been keeping under carpet, and they have, whenever the question was raised, they did not respond to it. The second part, that US didn't go for this kind of policy. So their aging is very, what you call slow. It is not taking that fast, isn't it? So I think our growth rate has moderated. Just a minute. No, just a minute. No, okay, please. That is over lunch. Otherwise, I mean, he has given very.
You have the
time.
protection of lunch to speak. Now you have to finish.
No, that is what I'm saying. So our growth rate has moderated, but across states, across space, it is different. That is what we have to take care of. I mean, certain pockets are there. Perhaps somewhere reversal is even needed. So that is one important part. I think you agree. You tend to agree with that. Child sex ratio is pretty bad.
Yeah,
Is
actually,
it?
I noticed actually the aging of the population issue is missing from the all the kind of stuff. I think that is particular to China's situation.
So I mean, this is very important. I mean, that is what I wanted to speak on. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Definite policy, there is maybe 2, 3 or 4 sometimes.
On that we can talk in detail.
Hello, thank you. In fact, if we would have had population control before 2 decades, we would have had demographic dividend before 2 decades. Would you like to, please take.
There was one observation about why we are not able to hear the voices of the urban poor. There's one point that I was making in my presentation which I just couldn't elaborate upon. If I were to give the Bangalore example, there are at least a dozen organizations, civil society organizations, which are representing the urban poor. They have members on their committees, and urban poor's voices are being heard. At least they're shouting, they're screaming, and they're trying to say these are what our problems are. What is missing, as somebody pointed out, is the fact that we're not able to listen to them and accommodate their concerns in our plans, in our policies, in our programs. I think that is missing. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Colleagues, and Professor Ravi Srivastava, I would like to tell you that what's the point of being a chairman unless I have the authority to misuse it? So, Anupama standing there. Thanks, friends. It has been a very exciting session. So I have a long list of questions, but I would be coming perhaps in the next panel discussion. I can always share my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Professor Kundu, speakers, and all the participants.